Are you throwing me out of my own home? The question did not come from a stranger, not from a difficult tenant, not from a problem neighbor. It came from his son. Robert Thompson stood in the middle of the kitchen, the court notice still lying on the table, the air conditioner blasting from the living room. Across from him, Evan, 35, arms crossed, jaw tight, waited for an answer he already knew. Robert did not raise his voice. "I'm not throwing you out of your home. I'm removing you from mine." The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Linda lowered her eyes. She had feared this moment for years, years of pretending the arrangement was temporary, years of calling it help when it had long since become dependence. But that night, one word finally entered the room: boundary. The hardest part was not that Robert had decided to go to court. The hardest part was that it had taken him 11 years. When Robert paid off the mortgage on his house in Syracuse, New York, he expected one thing: peace. After 25 years at the same manufacturing plant, surviving layoffs, wage freezes, and economic downturns, he believed the final payment meant more than freedom from debt. He thought it meant rest. The house was modest: 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a small yard, an old maple tree planted when his first child was born. It was not an investment, it was his life. That was why he framed the final mortgage receipt. What he did not frame was the fact that one bedroom had never become available. It was still occupied by his adult son. Evan had moved back home at 24. At first it made sense. He had graduated into a weak job market and said he only needed time to get established. Robert and Linda opened the door without hesitation. What they did not realize was that 1 year would turn into 11. In the beginning, Evan tried. He sent resumes, went to interviews, talked about opportunities. But as the years passed, the urgency faded. The interviews stopped. The applications slowed. Plans grew vague. Comfort replaced momentum. He picked up occasional freelance design work online, enough to pay for his phone, his subscriptions, his nights out. But he paid no rent. He did not split utilities. He rarely bought groceries. And every time the issue came up, he answered with the same calm, dismissive tone: "I'm not costing you that much." But by then, the problem was no longer money, it was permanence. The moment that changed everything came on a hot Saturday in July. Robert walked in after mowing the lawn and found Evan's friends spread across the living room, playing, pizza boxes, shoes on the coffee table, the air conditioning running full blast. He stood in the doorway. "Evan." His son barely looked up. "What? Why is the air conditioning set so low? It's hot." Robert took a slow breath. "You're not paying the electric bill." Then Evan paused his game, looked at him and said, "You chose to own a house." It was not loud, not even angry, but it landed with brutal force. That night, Robert sat at the kitchen table with a pile of bills and a calculator. Property taxes, insurance, internet, electricity, maintenance. He wrote down the numbers and slid the paper across to his son. "Tell me what you think is fair." Evan glanced at it. "I never signed a contract." Linda looked up, hurt. "We didn't think we needed one." He shrugged. "That's not my fault." That was the moment the fog lifted for Robert. A few days later, he searched something he never imagined he would need to ask: how to legally remove an adult child from a home in New York. The answer was colder than he expected, but clear. The law distinguishes between a tenant and a licensee. A tenant has a lease or rental arrangement. A licensee is simply someone living there with permission. And permission can be revoked. Robert and Linda met with a housing attorney. The attorney warned them: no changing locks, no throwing out belongings, no cutting utilities, no self-help eviction. If they wanted their home back, they had to follow the law: written notice, waiting period, then court. Linda asked the hardest question: will the court care that he is our son? The attorney answered plainly: the court will care who owns the property and whether proper procedure was followed. The notice was served: 30 days to vacate. Evan read it and smirked. "You are bluffing." Robert looked him in the eye. No. For the first time, Evan's confidence cracked. "You are really taking your own son to court?" Linda answered before Robert could. We are really done pretending this is temporary. The 30 days passed. Evan did not pack. He did not seriously apartment hunt. Instead, he read internet articles about illegal eviction and convinced himself his parents had no right to remove him. Robert kept his answer simple. That is why we are doing it legally. Soon after, the court papers arrived. Thompson versus Thompson, a father suing his son. On the day of the hearing, Syracuse Housing Court felt cold and procedural. No grand speeches, no dramatic, just bright lights, folders and facts. When the case was called, a few heads turned. Robert and Linda stood beside their attorney. Evan stood alone, confident enough to represent himself. Judge Patricia Reynolds began with simple questions. Did Evan deny that his parents owned the house? No. Did he deny receiving notice? No. Did he pay rent? No. Was there a lease? No. Each answer narrowed the room around him. Then came Evan's defense. He argued that he had become a tenant through long-term occupancy. He had lived there for over a decade. It was his primary residence. He received mail there. In his mind, time had become entitlement. The judge listened, then asked the only questions that mattered. Have you ever paid rent? No. Did you ever agree to pay rent? No. Did you contribute a defined share of household expenses in exchange for living there? No. The judge nodded slightly. Allowing you to stay does not create a lease. Then she explained it clearly. Under New York law, Evan was not a tenant. He was a licensee, someone allowed to stay by the owner's permission. His parents had revoked that permission in writing. That was the legal reality. Evan tried one more time. But I have lived there so long that it is my home. The judge's answer was calm and devastating. Time does not transform permission into ownership. Then he asked about his rights. Due process. Whether any of this was legal. The judge answered just as calmly. This is due process. You were served. You were given notice. You are being heard. Then she asked if he had any statute or case law supporting his position. Evan opened his folder, printed articles, online comments, forum threads. But no law. No. He admitted. That was enough. The judge ruled in favor of Robert and Linda. She granted possession and gave Evan 14 days before enforcement. Before moving on, she delivered one final line. This court does not resolve family conflict. It enforces property law. Being a parent does not eliminate an owner's right to reclaim possession of their home. The gavel fell. Brief. Final. On the drive home, no one spoke. For the first time in years, Evan no longer looked defiant, just shaken. At home, he tried to turn the loss into anger. You didn't have to humiliate me. Robert, exhausted, answered quietly. We didn't humiliate you. We set a boundary. That hurt because both of them knew it was true. 2 weeks later, the moving truck arrived. No apology. No dramatic reconciliation. Just boxes, silence, and 11 years, finally turning into consequence. When Evan loaded the last of his things, he looked at his father and said, "You could have handled this differently." Robert held his gaze. So could you. Then Evan climbed into the truck and drove away. The house fell quiet again. Not happy, but honest. 3 months later, Robert received a text message. Signed a lease. Starting a job next week. He read it twice, then handed the phone to Linda. Sometimes boundaries feel cruel, until they become the only thing strong enough to force someone to stand on his own. In the end, Robert and Linda did not lose a son. They lost an illusion. The illusion that comfort creates growth. The illusion that endless support is still support. The illusion that love alone can do the work that only boundaries can do. Sometimes it cannot. Sometimes reality needs a door to close. And sometimes it needs a judge to say out loud what two parents have spent years trying not to say themselves.